again to our show that is called Real Shames, a show where we watch movies from our movie list of shame or movie blind spots. Basically, movies we haven't seen that we're watching and we're telling you all about them. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
This week, Andy has chosen 2 movies from my list of shame. Movies I have not yet seen, but I have seen because otherwise it'd be pretty boring to hear me talk about it.
Yeah.
He's
going to watch them while I stare into the camera.
I read your comments. You guys don't like me comparing movies to movies I haven't seen, but it happens. So I'm going to have Andy tell you all about the first movie we're doing today.
Little Joe gets shot in a nightclub while gambling, and now his eternal soul is being fought over by angels and devils, while his loving wife Petunia prays that he'll be okay and also change his gambling ways in Cabin in the Sky.
Little Joe, rise up from that bed and report for duty.
Report? Report where?
Now, where do you suppose you'd be reporting? A shiftless no-account like you is. Get up!
I can't get up from this bed. I'm a very sick man.
Little Joe, you ain't sick no more. You're dead.
So Cabin in the Sky was directed by Vincente Minnelli. Vincente Minnelli was, this movie came out in 1943. 2 years later, Vincente Minnelli would marry a lady named Judy Garland.
Oh.
And Judy Garland would give birth to Liza Minnelli. Yeah, Vincente Minnelli is Liza Minnelli's father. Vincente Minnelli also directed tons and tons of films, a lot of musicals, but also a lot of non-musicals. He directed things like Meet Me in St. Louis, which is a musical, American in Paris, Gigi, The Bandwagon, all musicals, several other musicals aside from those. And he directed movies like Father of the Bride, the original, with Spencer Tracy, which was remade as the Steve Martin film, and Some Came Running, as well as its sequel, 2 Weeks in Another Town. Busby Berkeley actually directed the Shine sequence of the film. Shine is sung by John W. Bubbles as Domino Johnson. So Busby Berkeley, of course, Busby Berkeley was known for directing, I think he directed 42nd Street, but a lot of those types of early kind of Hollywood musicals from the 1930s. Very, very showy, flashy, big musical numbers that Busby Berkeley directed in a lot of those films. Cabin in the Sky is written by Joseph Schrank and Mark Connolly. It is based on a 1940 musical, so a musical that came out 3 years prior to this film, by Vernon Duke, Lynn Root, and John Latouche. Actually, the movie Cabin in the Sky uses only 3 of the songs from the musical. The songs that they use are Cabin in the Sky, appropriate, the titular tune, Taking a Chance on Love, and Honey in the Honeycomb. But all the rest of the songs from the musical were not used in the movie. Instead, the movie just used other songs that were written for the film. Ethel Waters plays Petunia Jackson. Ethel Waters was in the Broadway show Cabin in the Sky as Petunia. Eddie Anderson, who's also known as Rochester, because Rochester was a character that he played for years and years and years with Jack Benny. He was Jack Benny's valet, Rochester. So Eddie Anderson, Rochester, kind of synonymous. He plays Little Joe Jackson. Lena Horne plays Georgia Brown. Has nothing to do with Sweet Georgia Brown, the basketball tune. I looked it up because I was like, oh, is that where they got Sweet Georgia Brown? But no, it's not. Just happens to be a coincidence they have the same name. Rex Ingram, who was also in the Broadway show, plays Lucius or Lucifer Jr. Kenneth Spencer plays a dual role as both the General and as Reverend Green. Butterfly McQueen, who was obviously in Gone with the Wind, she plays Lily. John W. Bubbles plays Domino Johnson. And look for Louis Armstrong as one of the demons or the devils.
Yeah.
He's credited as trumpeter, which is appropriate because he did play the trumpet. And Duke Ellington and his orchestra make an appearance towards the end of the film. This is a movie from your list of shame, but it's also from my list of shame. I've never seen Cabin in the Sky, so we're both going into it blind as far as I know. But because it is your week, you get to go first and tell us, did you know anything about Cabin in the Sky? And what did you ultimately think of Cabin in the Sky?
All right. Well, as per usual, I didn't know a whole lot about it going into it. I think you told me it was a musical, so I feel like that's the theme for this week. So I kind of expected a musical, and that's all I knew.
All right.
So, for me, this movie took a while to get going. And it's interesting because it doesn't, there's musical numbers in it, but it's not structured like a musical. Like it's odd in that manner of fact. And I was wondering in watching, like, is this, I think this is a musical. Am I remember correctly?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's singing, but it really doesn't. I mean, there is singing, obviously, but I was trying to figure out, like, is there singing before basically little Joe dies and comes back before then? I feel like there is one number where she's in the garden, but I could be wrong.
I don't remember, honestly.
But so for me, it was like, okay, this is weird because I expected like it to start out with like a grand number and then go into it, all that kind of stuff. I was not sure how I felt about this movie until little Joe got shot. And then when we saw like the personification of, Lucifer Jr. and we saw, basically the general, Jesus or one of Jesus' angels in the movie, like kind of almost being like the devil and angel on the shoulder, trying to get him to do good things, trying to manipulate the world. It kind of like a little bedazzled, or is it bedazzled? Yeah, bedazzled kind of thing going on. That would happen. Two movies would be many, many years after this. But that made the movie more interesting to me, right? It gave me more stakes. I found it more interesting. And, is little Joe going to actually do enough to redeem himself to go to heaven, or is he still destined for hell and all that kind of stuff? So it pepped up for me. And I think overall, I ended up liking the movie with that. It's just, I guess the hard part for me was kind of thinking about it as a musical. And I really needed to push that out of my head because, again, there's singing in it, but it's not a musical in what we would think now in a traditional sense of a musical and all that kind of stuff. And the music numbers are okay. Like, I don't feel like none of them were like toe tappers for me or were super rousing, but they soothed the movie and everything like that. And there's some interesting things that happen. Like, I think one of the most interesting shots in this movie is the church gossiping thing, I guess, where little Joe shows up to church the first time and they're talking about him, or they're talking about it through the pews and they're going back and gossiping about it, and like one person would get up and sing for the song and then they'd wait, or they'd talk while he's singing, and then, or when he's done singing, they'll tell him, and you tell the person behind it, and someone else will stand up and sing. Like that whole shot tracking over the pews, and that I thought was really interesting and really well done, and not something it can point out as something I see very often, but it was a very interesting, very well done, very, very cool shot to see in the movie. So for me, I think there's some really good things in this movie. I overall ended up liking it. It's just, it kind of took a while to get going for me, but when it got going, it got interesting. So that's kind of where I am on Cabin in the Sky. I'm going to toss it over to you. You didn't know anything about it. You probably knew something about it, but you didn't see it before.
Right.
What are your thoughts about Cabin in the Sky after watching it?
Yeah, I didn't know a lot about it. I mean, other than, it's an all-black musical that came out in 1943. Wasn't even aware that it was directed by Vincent Minnelli, although I've seen, I think, all of those musicals that I mentioned early at the beginning of the episode, Meet Me in St. Louis, American in Paris, etc., etc. I think I've seen all of those. Yeah. But I've never seen Cabin in the Sky. I was aware of who Eddie Anderson was, for Rochester and all that, and obviously who Lena Horne is. The only song that I actually knew from this that I actually recognized is Taking a Chance on Love. I have heard that before. I feel like that's a popular kind of older song that was taken from this musical. I'm kind of with you. I don't know that I'm that favorable on the movie overall. I completely agree with you. I mean, none of the music, other than Taking a Chance on Love, none of the music really got me going. Yeah. And the musical is very low key. Yeah. It's just because, when we think musicals, we think of big numbers. We think of more dancing and stuff, more kind of action-y pieces with people running around. Now, Bubbles, or John W. Bubbles, Domino Johnson, played by John W. Bubbles. I think he also went by Bubbles, like just as a, what do you call it? Mononym? Mononym? Yeah, I think he went by Bubbles sometimes. But his number in the club is a little bit more lively, and Duke Ellington and his orchestra and everything. But Eddie Anderson wasn't like a big dancer
Yeah.
guy. Neither was Ethel Waters, right? So they basically just stand. There's a part where they dance a little bit in the house. And I thought that was cool because the one guy does like the moonwalk. I was like, oh, the moonwalk. I wrote that down. Well, because I remember back when, Michael Jackson did the moonwalk. I'm going off on a tangent here. But when Michael Jackson did the moonwalk in the 80s, yeah, it blew people's minds.
Yeah.
But then there were some people that were like, oh, it's been done before. And some people were like, well, Bob Fosse did that. And you can look, I think in the movie The Little Prince, he does kind of the moonwalk or whatever.
Yeah.
But this guy was doing it back in 1943. So I thought that was cool. And who knows, there may be an earlier movie or something where somebody does it. But I was like, oh, it's awesome. He's doing like a moonwalk kind of thing. But yeah, you think of musicals as being a lot more kind of bombastic than this. Not to say that means this movie is bad necessarily, but I kept expecting to get a little more swept up in it.
Yeah.
I do like the whole, like you said, the angels and the devils, it's almost like they're on his shoulder and they're fighting over him. That's
and
fun.
I like how like Lucifer Jr.'s trying to like get that one girl to do
pick
things.
up the
He's like,
little ticket thing.
yeah,
or whatever.
or like to like he had something. She had something on her like her dresser or something, and he was like,
doing
that
he's
too.
like, no, not that. No, wear that. Do this or whatever. Yeah, I mean, all that stuff's pretty fun. Rex Ingram that plays Lucius or Lucifer Jr. He's great. It's fun to see Louis Armstrong as one of the devils as well. But yeah, it just never really took off for me. The story's pretty fun and whatnot, but because I was not really as into the musical numbers and everything. Again, it's not a bad film. I didn't hate it or anything like that, but it just fell kind of flat for me.
yeah, for sure.
So I wasn't really that into it, unfortunately. But it was an interesting film to see.
Yeah, I mean it's worth seeing, but yeah, I'm with you. It's just kind of it's maybe like a little too low key to be like really, really, interesting and sought after.
Yeah.
So where are the critics on, or do you need any extra notes on this bad boy?
Yeah, so it was actually nominated for one Oscar for Best Original Song, and that original song is I thought it would be Taking a Chance on Love because that's the song that I know. Yeah. But the Best Original Song that was nominated for is Happiness Is a Thing Called Joe. But it lost to a movie. I don't remember the song, but the movie is called Hello Frisco Hello, which I've never heard of. Mm-hmm. So, but this movie was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress in 2020.
All right.
And it's 81% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, 80% audience. It was not in the Leonard Maltin book that I have. Mm-hmm. I think I have the 2015 version. It was not listed in there. I don't find any Cisco or Ebert review for it. So I plucked the IMDb score, which is 7.1 out of 10. I did write down, because I have a Pauline Kael book, and she talks about Cabin in the Sky in her book. So I will quote from her review. This is not her entire review of the film. She doesn't give stars or anything like that. But she says it's one of the best musicals ever made in this country.
Wow.
It becomes even better with the years. Now it's easier to ignore the weaknesses in the script because it's so exciting to see legendary artists such as Ethel Waters, Lena Horne, Louis Armstrong, and Bubbles, a.k.a. John Williams Sublett. I didn't write that down. So I've got John W. Bubbles. John W. Sublett, I guess, is his actual name, as they were in the 1940s. I will say one little thing of trivia that I saw was that Ethel Waters is the great aunt of Crystal Waters. Crystal Waters had a hit back in the late 90s with a song called 100% Pure Love. From the back to the middle and around again. I'm going to be there till the 100% Pure Love. 100%. Crystal Waters is Ethel Waters' great niece.
All right.
Yeah, I found that interesting. I don't know. Crystal Waters may have other songs. The only one I know is 100% Pure Love. So anyway, a little bit of trivia for you there. But yeah, I'm not as hot on this film, unfortunately. It is worth seeing, but it didn't pop for me.
Yeah,
it didn't pop. I don't know. So
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this Monday. So on these Monday episodes, we like to talk about what we've been watching. So I'm going to toss it over to you. What have you been watching?
All right. So because we still haven't made it yet to the Oscars, I think it's coming up. I don't remember when this episode is going to air, but I know the Oscars has not come on yet. It is soon, but has not come on yet. So I have been going through and trying to watch some of the Oscar nominees. Best Picture, Best Actor, whatever I can. We both have already seen, like Banshees of Inisherin and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Some of those movies. Top Gun Maverick. So I watched another film that's on Netflix. starring Ana de Armas as Marilyn Monroe.
Yep.
It's called Blonde. And I was mentioning to you earlier, although we haven't talked about me seeing Blonde, but I was mentioning to you about how I feel like all of the Best Picture nominees are at least 2.5 hours long,
Yes.
it feels like. I mean, there are some exceptions. Banshees of Inisherin is not that long. I don't think Top Gun Maverick's that long.
Avatar's 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Avatar's 3 hours. But Everything Everywhere All at Once, although we like it, it is 2 hours and 20 minutes or something. Yeah. It's a pretty long movie. Blonde is really long. Elvis is really long. The Fabelmans is really long. All these movies are really long. I say all that to say when I saw the preview for Blonde, or I saw that there was going to be a movie, immediately what stuck out to me was Ana de Armas cannot do a convincing accent,
Yeah.
right? I mean, bless her heart. I like Ana de Armas, but she's Cuban. Yeah. She can't do the Marilyn Monroe accent.
I can't do a convincing accent to save my life. So I understand. I understand the pain.
So I really didn't, kind of like Elvis, I had no real intention of seeing this film. But because it got nominated for, I don't think Best Picture, but she got nominated for Best Actress.
Yeah.
Because it got nominated for Best Actress, I was like, okay, well, it's on the list. I'll watch it. So I watched it all 2 hours and 40-something minutes. And I will say, she cannot do the accent. I mean, she can't swallow her Cuban accent, right?
Yeah.
You know, she just can't. She just does not sound convincing as Marilyn Monroe or really doing an American accent, bless her heart. She does get the whole breathy Marilyn Monroe tone down. And the way they made her look, you know, there's scenes where she's a dead ringer for Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely. But I will say, weirdly enough, I enjoyed this film.
Oh, really?
I liked it. I did. Yes. It's different. I mean, the guy who directed it, he directed like Chopper with Eric Bana, and like, so he has some very interesting films in his filmography. He is not the kind of person that I would expect to direct a biopic about Marilyn Monroe, but here we are. But I liked it. It super depressing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a happy film at all. As we know, you know, Marilyn Monroe was a troubled young woman. Unfortunately, you know, she rocketed to stardom. She was a huge movie star, but she had a lot of demons. She had a lot of things, a lot of personal things in her life that she battled with, and she battled with drug addiction and alcoholism and things like that. And you get all of that. I mean, you get the warts. I complain a lot of times that you don't get the warts and all.
You get the mole and all.
You get the warts in this film. And after a while, I mean, I just got used to her accent, right? I mean, I just went with it, right? And overall, I mean, she does do a great job. Aside from the accent, she does do a great job, and she really embodies the character, and she really gives it a role. Kind of like, you know, I thought Austin Butler, although we both don't like Elvis, Austin Butler's good as Elvis.
Yeah, I think Austin Butler's like, yeah, I agree. It's just the movie let Austin Butler down, I feel like, with Elvis.
Right. Well, fortunately, in this case, I feel like she's great, and I don't feel like the movie lets her down. But again, this is not a happy movie at all. It's quite depressing, but it's long. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes, but I found it very hypnotic and kind of mesmerizing in a way. And I don't know who did the music for it, but I liked the soundtrack. It has like kind of some weird kind of electronic music that it plays at times, but I felt like it fit. I mean, it's you know, it sounds anachronistic to me, but it fit the movie. But overall, I'm favorable on Blonde.
Interesting.
I actually, you know, when it came to an end, I was like, wow, I liked that.
I do not want to see Blonde, but you saying that it's kind of maybe moved it onto the fence for me.
I think if nothing else, it's better than Elvis. So it's got that going for it.
You can't get much worse than Elvis.
Right. So
well, I mean, we can. We've done it on this show, but
yeah. I mean, I liked it. I was surprised, and maybe it's because I was not thinking I would like it. Maybe I just kind of, but of course I was not thinking I would like Elvis, and I didn't like Elvis.
Yeah.
But this movie, I really didn't think I was going to like it, but I did like it overall. I feel like it's good, and the supporting cast is good too. Like Adrian Brody, or is that right? Adrian Brody plays.
Yeah, I think he's in there.
I was thinking not Adam Brody, Adrian Brody. He plays Arthur Miller.
Okay.
And like Bobby Cannavale plays Joe DiMaggio, because she's married to both of those guys, you know. But everybody does a good job in it. I thought it was good. I was favorable on it. The other movie that I have watched is also another Oscar nominee. Now, this movie, it only got nominated for Best Cinematography, but also on Netflix, called Bardot, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths.
Okay.
I've never heard of it until the nominations came out. I didn't watch any trailers. I didn't know anything about it. I just hit play. I watched it, also 2 hours and 40 minutes or so, 230, 240, something like that. Also, I really enjoyed this movie. I felt like this movie, I'm gonna reuse what I said about Blonde. I found it hypnotic and very mesmerizing. I can see why it was nominated for Best Cinematography. There's a ton of one take things, like following people down hallways and all these tracking shots and things where there's no cuts, or at least if there is cuts, they disguise it well. But I found this movie really, really mesmerizing. It's about a Mexican like documentary filmmaker who's aging. Honestly, to me, he looked a lot like Ron Silver, but he's a kind of an aging documentary filmmaker. He lives in LA with his family, but he's come back to Mexico for briefly, and he kind of does things in Mexico, but then he's going to go back and accept an award that they, like the LA Critics Society or somebody's going to give him some kind of journalistic award that they're going to give him. The movie's long, but it's really kind of about him and his, like, how he thinks. Honestly, I can draw a lot of parallels between this movie and 8.5. It's about a guy. He's not now in 8.5. He's supposed to make a movie, and everybody's kind of bombarding him and saying like, "What do you think? What about this or whatever?" He's just kind of trying to get away, but he has all these kind of flights of fancy. Mm-hmm. He envisions things. There's a lot of kind of surreal touches in 8.5. There's a lot of surreal touches in this movie. A lot of weird kind of things, but beautiful things as well. And the cinematography is gorgeous. So when the movie got to the end, I saw that's directed by Alejandro Inarritu, who's the guy that did Birdman, The Revenant. So all the long takes made sense to me. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of his shtick. Yeah. But I liked it. Overall, I did read some critics' reviews after. Critics, I think it's fresh maybe, but a lot of the critics are not nearly as enthusiastic about it as I was. They were pointing out some things which, whatever. But I liked it. I mean, I really liked it. In fact, I think this is probably my favorite Alejandro Inarritu film. Because The Revenant, I'm not that crazy about Birdman.
I've never seen Birdman. I'm not that crazy about Revenant.
Yeah, The Revenant, it was okay, but I mean, I wasn't over the moon about it. I've seen like Babel and 21 Grams that he did, but honestly, I don't remember anything. And I've not seen like Amores Perros that he did, the first film, stuff like that, so I probably should. But this is my favorite movie out of the movies that I've seen that he's done. I was a big fan of it.
And that's called Bordeaux?
Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths. There's a lot of, like, I don't want to say meta kind of stuff in it, but there will be scenes where somebody in the background will be talking about something, and that same thing will happen later in the film. There's a lot of that kind of thing going on in the movie. So if you pay attention to it, I think it's very cool. You're like, oh, this is what they were talking about earlier in the film, and now it's happening. Oh, now that makes sense. That kind of thing. But it's I don't want to say stream of consciousness, but it's all kind of seen through this guy's eyes and just kind of how he, I don't know, how he feels and how he's feeling at the time, and his family and how they respond to him. Some of the reviews that I read complained that it wasn't saying much, or that it was boring, or that it was self-indulgent and stuff like that. But I didn't feel any of that. Like, to me, it was just very, very mesmerizing and hypnotic. Oh, cool. And I just went along for the ride. So I was in it.
All right.
I was in it.
Say the name again.
Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths on Netflix. So,
and you watched Blonde before that.
Both on Netflix. Yeah. What about you? What have you been watching?
So, like you, I've been trying to get through the nominated movies before the Oscars come out. I've been focusing mostly on Best Picture nominees.
Yep.
So I watched Steven Spielberg directed movie. I feel like he got nominated last year. He gets nominated a lot. This movie that's loosely based on his life, people are saying, called The Fabelmans.
The Fabelmans. Seems like it's more than loosely. At least the preview did.
Yeah, I mean, the characters are named different and stuff like that. I think it borrows heavily, but
the character's name is like Reven instead of Steven.
Yeah. Reven
Rielberg.
Yeah. The Fabelmans, I think it's one of weaker Steven Spielberg movies. It feels like the tone's all over the place, especially with Michelle Williams' character. She is melodramatic in this movie.
I think she's nominated.
Yeah, she is nominated, and she's at like 11 in this movie. She is out there and melodramatic, and everyone else is like, she's in this high melodramatic drama, and everyone else is kind of like in this kind of comedy dramedy kind of thing, and it clashes for me. Like it's so different.
Well,
Like,
what about Judd Hirsch? He's nominated as well.
he's in it. It's one of those like he's in it for a few minutes, but he's just like
But he got
such
a nomination.
yeah. It's like Kieran Haynes from last year.
Oh, Belfast.
Belfast, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just one of those like he is such a character and he brings so much that it's interesting.
Okay.
I mean, I can kind of see it, but he doesn't do a lot for me in the movie. So I think this movie. I think what am I trying to say? I feel what this movie is missing is it's not focusing enough on the main boy character, the filmmaker. Like when it's focusing on him and him making movies, the movie is awesome. There's things that he does, like where you can see him, like he's filming things and the camera's at another angle, and you can see him filming things and how that's done. And then later on, you'll see the film that he made, and it is like those angles that he was filming and all that kind of stuff, and how it's done, and the aspects and how creative he is with filming. All that stuff is really interesting, and all the stuff around him is really interesting. But whenever we start getting into more family stuff, more school stuff, for me, it just kind of falls apart. And I really wish it focused more on him than it did like his whole life and his whole family at this point, right? And for me, that felt like that didn't really. It felt like it did the movie disservice. Like the movie was really more interesting where we're focusing on him.
Does the kid have two sisters in the movie?
The kid has
Spielberg has like two sisters, I think.
He has a sister. I think he has one
Just
sister.
one.
Yeah,
I feel like Spielberg has two sisters in real life. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And Spielberg is one. Maybe he has another one. I can't remember. I don't think he has any brothers. He has sisters.
I will say, at the end, the last shot I think is really interesting, and it makes sense in the context of the movie. But the last shot I think is really cool, and it's kind of like a wink at the audience and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the whole movie would have been better if it had that kind of tone to it. So for me, it just felt like a jumble, and it just didn't feel very coherent. And I felt like it focused on the less interesting things about this kind of movie, which is, the young kid. I want to say his name is Sammy. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't believe I can't remember his name. About him making movies. I wish it focuses more on that and less on like family dynamics and all that kind of stuff, and school dynamics and the world at large and all that kind of stuff. And I wish it was a little bit more autobiographical, because there's things in Steven Spielberg's life that is interesting. Like he used to sneak onto the film lot. Like that's interesting. That's cinematic. Let's see that on film. And we don't get that in this movie.
Yeah.
So that's The Fabelmans. I think, like West Side Story is a much better movie that Steven Spielberg did recently and all that kind of stuff. So it didn't work for me. The other movie I watched is another Best Picture winner. We don't know yet. Maybe I'm predicting the future. Huh. Next, a Best Picture nominee, and that is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever.
I mean, I can tell you right now, it will not be a winner. Yeah. I don't think that it's going to win.
You know me, I like my superhero movies, and I got to keep up.
I do.
And I've been waiting for Marvel to drop this bad boy on Disney Plus.
You talk about another movie that's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, because it is.
This movie, I wasn't as over the moon with Black Panther as a lot of people were. There was things I liked about it. I liked the basic gist of the story. I thought Michael B. Jordan was very interesting as an antagonist, and Chadwick Boseman was awesome as Black Panther. So obviously in this movie, we lost Chadwick Boseman before it, so they had to kind of retool the story a little bit, and they incorporated his death into it, and I think they do it fairly well and all that kind of stuff. For me, this movie just feels completely unfocused. Like it just feels like we're jumping from one thing to the next. Well, I know you're probably gonna feel that way about all. I was gonna say I'll let you say what you're gonna say in a second. This whole phase of Marvel movies have been misses. Like everything after Avengers Endgame to this, which closes off the phase, I think 4 that we're in right now, have all been misses. They all have been not great, not as good, just kind of just misses. What'd you?
No, I was going to say unfocused. That sounds scary
Yeah.
to me, considering the movie's almost 3 hours long.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally. There's things that I feel like it repeats the same beats again, and it's like, okay, we kind of already covered this track. Let's do something new. I thought having Namor in it would save the movie and it would be interesting, and he is interesting. He's an interesting presence and stuff like that, but he just doesn't save the movie. And I feel like, I mean, well, I don't know if I'll say whoever takes up the Black Panther mantle is not as interesting or charismatic or even in the movie that much. I feel like they don't focus on that person at all because that person's just not interesting.
Who directed this one?
Same person, Ryan Coogler,
Ryan
and he
Coogler,
wrote
okay.
it too. They try to shoehorn in a lot of stuff in here because we have Namor, we have Ironheart, which is Riri Williams is the character's name, Ironheart from Things. And her suit looks CGI. Her suit looks so unrealistic. Like I know, like since like Iron Man 2, they basically have CGI'd the Iron Man suits, but they must have did something or left a file off or didn't do a final pass because her suit looked so fake compared to how realistic we've seen these Iron Man suits in prior movies. It looked like it missed like the pass to make it look dirty or make it look realistic. It was just not good. So this movie is just it's just not great. It's not interesting. Honestly, like of the movies that got nominated for Best Picture, because I've watched in the past 2 weeks, was that 4 of them, and I've seen they've been really lackluster movies.
Yeah.
Like I think everything ever all at once is heads and shoulders above every other movie I've seen. Oh, minus Banshees of Inisherin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a not. I'll be curious when you get through the Best Picture nominees, but I feel like this year they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for these Best Picture winners or nominees because none of these movies I would recommend for anyone to watch other than Everything Everywhere All at Once. So with Black Panther, it's too long, too unfocused. Like what's the movie's not about anything. Like it's kind of about colonialism and the first movie is like about that, but the first movie does that stuff so much better. And this movie, it just kind of hand waves towards it. It's not good. I don't know. So I'm just hoping that Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania is going to be a turning point for Marvel because my, have the mighty fallen. I mean, ever since Endgame, they have just not been producing. They have not been making good movies. That machine is just not interested in churning out good content like it used to.
Well, I mean, I've placed a moratorium on watching superhero movies because I'm sick of them.
Yeah.
Like, to me, they could take a break. Maybe take a break, take the time to write some better stories,
Retool it,
and
yeah.
come out with some more, some more movies further on down the road that are better. And I can't judge the movies that you're talking about because I haven't seen any of them, but I don't want to. Not right now, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm so exhausted by all the superhero stuff. DC and Marvel, both. All of them.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they were doing like 2-3 movies a year, and I think they just kind of got out over their skis, I guess, is a saying.
I mean, they're money makers, so they're just going to keep cranking them out. I get it, but it's just like, dude.
So yeah, it's not good. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Hopefully, they've planted the seeds for some interesting things later on with Namor and maybe with Ironheart. I mean, she has a series. But I mean, I really not looking forward to the Ironheart series at all because of this movie. Because she's not interesting. She's not charismatic at all. This movie is just full of people that are just uninteresting. You know what I mean? Like the world's interesting. Wakanda's interesting. Even like Namor's land is interesting. But it's just the people are just not popping on the screen and stuff like that. And yeah, not a fan. So that's what we've been watching. That's what I've been watching. It's been The Fabelmans, which is okay, and then Black Panther is a hard pass for me. So today, we watched Cabin in the Sky, a musical from 1943. What did you decide to pair that with?
Yeah, so the Cabin in the Sky has Lena Horne, the lovely Lena Horne in it. It's a musical. I decided to pair it with another music from 1943 that came out a little bit later, Also, this one, Lena Horne plays a much bigger role. It's called Stormy Weather, and we'll talk about it on Wednesday.
All right. Well, stay tuned for that. That's everything. Cabin in the Sky. More. Please like, subscribe, share, do all this social media stuff. It helps, and we appreciate it. And stay tuned next week. Stay tuned on Wednesday to see if we can fare that stormy weather. And we'll see you soon, guys. Have a good one.